one of the questions is, do you set long-term goals, basically longer than 5 years? And the most common response is sort of.
Now, when you were in corporate, every year you guys had to set goals, right? Because you were in sales and marketing.
Yeah, but those are short-term, right?
But at least it's some goals,
Right.
and it's in paper and you look at it and you're accountable because you give it to your boss.
When you talk about vision, you're talking usually long-term, right? Vision is usually infers long-term, greater than 5 years typically. And so I guess the question is, why is there such a disconnect between setting them and achieving them?
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Hey, Thriving in Tandem family. Welcome to this week's episode.
Hi, you guys.
And we're going to talk today about how to make your vision a reality.
Ooh.
Or whatever the title ends up being. But we're for you watching on YouTube, you'll notice that our studio, quote unquote, looks a little different.
Yes.
Right? We are here in our temporary studio at Lake Norman, right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Right on the water. It's beautiful here, you guys. If anybody loves lakes, you will really enjoy it here.
Yeah. And so we are kind of practicing making our own vision a reality this month of March. And we'll kind of talk about it as we go along here. But and that's kind of what spurred this episode and the title of this episode, because a lot of people, I think, have dreams and aspirations, but very few people achieve them. Now, when I did a little bit of research, it shows that 75% of people set goals and vision.
Which I thought that was a lot.
Now, in context, right? Like some of it is you say, when you do these surveys, people say yes.
Oh, so it could just be like they want to set goals or they think about it, but doesn't necessarily mean they do.
They
right?
have set a goal, right? But whether it's, we'll get into it.
Well, it could be like every year you want to lose weight, right?
Yeah. So 75% set them, but only 8% actually achieve them. So there's a huge disconnect in setting them and achieving them. And so we want to get into that because, even like when we have an assessment for our new clients, one of the questions is, do you set long-term goals, basically longer than 5 years? And the most common response is sort of. Right?
Yeah, that is the most common response.
I'd say sort of or yes, right? So I think, again, to the 75% say they set goals. So I think the sort of is in that because just in our own, just anecdotally, just from our own intake forms, I would say 75% say either yes or sort of. And about 25% say no.
Now, when you were in corporate, every year you guys had to set goals, right? Because you were in sales and marketing.
Yeah, but those are short-term, right?
But at least it's some goals,
Right.
And it's in paper and you look at it and you're accountable because you give it to your boss.
Yeah. So in the small scale, yes, we did that. And but for this discussion, when you talk about vision, you're talking usually long-term, right? Vision is usually infers long-term, greater than 5 years typically. And so I guess the question is, why is there such a disconnect between setting them and achieving them? And so that's what we're going to kind of get into today, and a lot from our own experience, as well as helping clients through it and all that. But let's just start really from our own experience. Number one, I think, when you look at this disconnect between setting them and achieving them, I think that's a big reason of why most people do not really truly establish true concrete vision and goals. So instead of the maybe and sort ofs to yes. I think, to me, and just through conversation and even just myself, early on, a lot of times when you talk about the vision, so let's say when I was in college, for example, or even before college, I think the vision of climbing up the corporate ladder and even making six figures seemed like a huge and daunting task because I couldn't really imagine doing that. But, I didn't want that. But at the same time, I think it looks kind of intimidating. And so for some people, you just don't even try, because when the task or vision or the dream seems too big or too unreachable, because especially if you're coming from my family, we didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, I think from your own experience, that's what makes these big dreams unattainable if you haven't actually experienced that in your own life, right? Either yourself or your family, your upbringing. And so I think trying to kind of reduce that friction, that intimidation factor, I think is a huge thing. And so just taking the six-figure thing, for example, that was something I kind of, well, that'd be nice. And I thought about it, but it wasn't like, I didn't have it in concrete writing. It wasn't like I had a vision book and said, this is when I'm going to make six figures.
So it wasn't like you had the vision and then you had the goals to back it.
No, I had the vision. Like I would be under that maybe category.
Okay.
Right. I would love to make six figures.
But you didn't have the goals
at the same time
how to achieve it.
Well, those are more the plan of how to achieve it. Right. So the goal, that would be a goal, is making six figures. But but it seemed kind of intimidating. So I didn't really think of it as realistic. I think it could be done, but I didn't think at the same time, it was conflict, right? I think it can be done, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do it.
Right.
So, but at the same time, it was still there. And so for me, it was just like, let's just make progress. So I was always one to just want to do better. And so if you, for example, going to college for one example, right? And paying your way through college like you did. And then, okay, I want to get into a major corporation. I got a marketing degree, or I'm getting a marketing degree. So I want to get into a major corporation because one, I think the money would be good and adds a layer of job security. And so that was the first phase. And so, but even that sometimes is big. And so I remember a friend of mine that graduated from high school, he was a year ahead of me, and he did an internship with Hewlett Packard the year before I graduated, and then they offered him a job. And so when I heard what he did, and I was like, oh, maybe I should try that. Right. And so sure enough, the summer before I graduated, summer of my junior year or summer of my senior year, or whatever, however you want to call it, basically the year before I graduated, I applied and got an internship with Coca-Cola. And then they offered me a job out of college 2 months before I graduated. So that was where it was just kind of always looking for opportunity, and then saying where most of my colleagues were just waiting till they graduated to then go look for a job. I was like, well, let me just take my summer and do an internship.
So that's a huge tip, you guys that are in college, because do an internship, because there's a good possibility they'll hire you.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you get out of college, you're all in that single pool trying to find jobs.
Yeah, because I'm looking at like, okay, that was like the kind of catch-22, if you will, is, once you graduate, they want you to have, they like experience
Mm-hmm.
over just a new college graduate, right? But then how do you get experience as a new graduate unless you get hired as a college graduate, right? So, so I figure, well, one is I was looking at it as, okay, they're hiring in college interns, so which means they're looking for me.
Mm-hmm. And they need people.
And
that's good.
I'm not going to be competing against people that already have experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I was like, okay, let's just do this and see what happens. And then sure enough, I got that. And then even though I knew that wasn't the job, that wasn't going to make my career at Coca-Cola, I also knew it would be good on my resume. And where I really wanted to go was in the pharmaceutical industry, but they were looking for sales experience. So I go, oh, great. I'll get my sales experience at Coca-Cola, work for a couple of years, and then I'll test the waters over there. And that's how it started. And then that's what happened. 2.5 years or 2 years after I was working for Coke, then I started applying for pharmaceutical companies, and I got this job with actually a major company. And then again, it was okay. It was a bump in pay. Now all of a sudden I'm making 50 grand plus bonuses. And then, so this is 25 years ago, folks. So this is pretty decent money at the time. And then, one thing after another, my pay increased, and eventually I did hit six figures. And I remember when I hit six figures, I was like, oh, it wasn't as tough as I thought. It was really just putting one step in front of the other, and also always looking for opportunity to grow. So I remember a lot of people were, especially once you get in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of headhunters, and people would,
yeah, they used to call the time for you.
Yeah, people would jump ship, right? And the way I looked at it is like, I didn't want to just make a lateral jump in position for a little bit increase of pay. I wanted to make a jump. If I was going to make a jump, it was for clear promotion. And so I never took those headhunting calls. Oh, I mean, I took the headhunting calls, but I never really went after anything until I was contacted by an ex-coworker at the pharmaceutical company, the first company I worked for. She went to another company to really, it was a promotion. It was still a sales position, but it was kind of like it was viewed in the pharmaceutical industry as a promotion because it was more of a specialized sales force that, yes, you definitely got a bump in pay, but it was also considered a promotion because it was more of like, they usually hire more tenured and more successful reps, and it was a little bit more of a technical sell. It was, anyway, so all that to say is an ex-colleague contacted me and said, hey, do you want to potentially work here in this position? And I said, yeah, it's definitely something I was looking at. It was a promotion in my eyes, and of course the bump in pay. And then after some time, hit the mark, the financial mark,
bump in benefits.
Yeah, everything. And so, anyways, all to say is here, when it came to going back to the vision part, where I didn't have it in writing per se, but I was always one to also just want to progress, move forward. So I had it in the back of my mind. I thought it'd be nice. And every once in a while I'd revisit that and say, well, would it be nice? And then next thing you know, here I am. And it really wasn't the big a lift as I looked at when I was in college, right? When I was in college, it's like, that seems unattainable. But the reality is, when I just made those baby steps, and also always had the mindset of progress, not about just trying to go from, $35,000 a year to 100,000, because I think that's where it feels daunting, is because you're down here and you want to get up here, and how do I get there? And we feel like we have to make this big leap to get there, as opposed to just baby steps. And so, fast forward into even now what we're doing. And then the other thing, I was also thinking about, man, when I got to my early 40s, so this is after we're married, and we just had this discussion right before we.
Yeah, because I don't remember this.
So I remember saying to myself, and I think
say to yourself.
And I know I shared it with you, but it wasn't like, again, one reason why you probably don't remember it. Well, so basically I said, wouldn't it be nice to retire by 50? And you said, I don't remember you saying that.
Yeah, I don't remember you saying that.
And because I didn't make it like a hard, this is a goal, or put it down in writing. Again, it's one of those things where I didn't put it down in writing per se, but I did make that comment. And then the comment you made to me then that you just did right before we went on camera was,
honey, you're not going to retire. You can work less hours, but you're not retiring. You're not going to be home all day watching TV or golfing. That's going to get old really quick and drive me crazy.
Yeah. And so what I told her just a few minutes ago,
he's got to be learning and growing and helping people. He likes stimulating things with his mind.
What I told my wife a few minutes ago, just like I told her years ago, was I'm not looking at retirement the way you're thinking of retirement. Like most people take a retirement, we just retire on the golf course or go fishing and skiing, whatever, travel all the time. I was just thinking, be able to retire from my corporate job, and so I can do what I want to do, have the freedom to do what I want to do, including potentially not working. if that's what I want to do. But of course, that's not what I want to do. So I did leave. I remember it didn't hit me till probably a couple, 2-3 years after I left the corporate job to consult to do what we're doing now full time. But I remember saying, oh, the reality is I left corporate at 49. And to have the freedom to do what I want to do, which is this, no, not just podcasting, but to consult with family business. And, financially, we were in a good shape, regardless of how this all worked out. So, and so anyways, we were able to achieve that. We were able for me to be able to retire at 50. And again, this was one of those things where I just made the comment. It wasn't like a hard and fast goal, like, yes, I'm going to retire by 50, but it was, wouldn't it be nice if? And then it was the thing that helped us be able to get to the position of doing that was the continual investment into our retirement, into funds and other things, whether it's our 401k at the time.
And then they were matching at your corporate.
Yeah. And
we had real estate
that
we got when we were young and just held on for years.
Yeah. And we have a nice portfolio, but it also didn't all happen all at once. It was one thing after another. And there were some mistakes we made along the way on real estate too. So it wasn't like everything was perfect. It wasn't like we made one big investment and just we made these big, huge returns on one thing. It was just continually investing.
Steady plodding.
Little at a time, right? Making progress. First retirement, and the next stage was into one, pretty inexpensive property at the time. It was only like a $130,000 duplex in Austin, Texas, but it grew into a substantial amount. But it was looking for the opportunity, and then we invested in another property, and then now we invest into apartment complexes. And so it was one step after another. It wasn't like we did one big thing, right? And it didn't happen all at once. It happened over years. But that allowed us, then all of a sudden looking back, you're like, oh, we're able to do it. But we didn't feel like we did anything special. Right.
Well, even with our business, that didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
The growing of it.
Yeah. And so I guess what we're trying to say is that one is the vision can seem daunting and big, but one, it's important to at least speak it out, but also revisit it quite often. And so that's what I did. That's kind of what we did.
Well, we do that in our weekly meetings. We get out what our goals are and we talk about it, and we make a lot of decisions because of that. Because there's so many things you want to do, and there could be so many great things, but maybe if it's not part of your goal, you're just going to get distracted. And then I have my vision board, and I have dates on it, and I have what does that look like exactly, and how can I work my way into achieving that goal? Because we'll say I want to lose weight every year. But do we say how much weight we want to lose and when we want to lose it by and what that looks like and what we're going to do to accomplish that?
And also even with the losing weight, it's 1 pound at a time, right? And I think not getting discouraged if you're not getting the progress that you want in the time you want. But I think the key is, are you making progress? And so progress over perfection, I think, is a huge thing. And
are you exercising? Because a lot of times the gym, the first of the year is so busy. Everybody buys memberships for Christmas. And then February, March comes around and it's dead in there. People just stop going.
Yeah. So now fast forward to today, and being here in Lake Norman is kind of, we're starting to practice our vision. And so a number of years ago, we talked about, where do we want to end up long term in our quote unquote retirement years, right?
Not in retirement years, but when we retire.
Yes, honey, I know that. you have a hang up with that term.
I do.
I'm just using it as a reference point.
Gotcha.
When people say retirement years, you kind of understand what the age category is, right? Do you want me to say in your 60s? You're 65 or 70? So, we a number of years ago, we did talk about, when we are in that retirement age, where do we want to live? What
Mhm.
does that look like? And we talked about what?
We love the water. So it could be a beach, it could be a lake, a lot of different things.
But we did decide not the beach
Right.
because, well, one, I think the salt water is just bad on your house, so the upkeep.
And your cars.
And then on the East Coast, you're worried about hurricanes.
Yeah, we don't want to have to go through that.
The West Coast, you don't have to worry about the hurricanes, but it's just tough in the house. But also, it's very hugely expensive in Southern California on the beach. So we're like, eh. And then we did talk about we didn't want to be in the city. We like to be a little bit out of the city, but close enough to take advantage of what the city offers. And then also close enough to a decent airport because we travel both for work and for pleasure. And so we want to be, next to an airport where you're not always having to connect everywhere.
Yeah, we can pick up and go when we want to.
So those are some of the basic requirements. And then, of course, want to have, a little bit of land and all that kind of stuff. And so a few years ago in 2021, we were invited to come out to Charlotte, North Carolina. And we had at the time, we had a client who was a NASCAR driver. And his parents rented an Airbnb on the lake in Lake Norman, which is just outside of Charlotte. And so we stayed with them and really loved the lake. It's a beautiful lake, very green, very lush, feel very out of the way. And, all the homes have a big plot of land, so you're not all on top of each other. And then so I went on Zillow and to look at home prices, and I was shockingly surprised in a good way of how affordable it would be to live on the lake in that area, this area, because we're here in Lake Norman right now. So anyways, kind of kicked around, but like, wow, we could live here. We could afford to live here. And so, and Charlotte is a good airport. I found out pretty recently that you can get to a lot of cities, even small mid-sized cities, with a direct flight. And Charlotte's actually is a good kind of the East Coast hub, I think, for American Airlines. So you can get around the country pretty good. And also, we like to travel, so it's a shorter trip to Europe than it is from California.
So you're going to be planning on taking me to Europe more often?
Well, I mean, think about it. If you lived out here on the East Coast, the trip to Europe, the flight to Europe is about as quick as our flight to Hawaii from California.
Wow.
Right. And so, but, we're going to be going to Italy in May, but from California. So it's a flight. It's a long flight. And so anyways, all I'll say is this area checked a lot of boxes. And then, so we talked about it for a little bit. And then in 2022, when we launched our book, we did a road tour, as you know, and we stopped here in Charlotte and found this Airbnb on the lake and had a great time. It's a great setup. It's right on the lake. It's got a dock, and you get access to some of the boating equipment. And so just a beautiful setup. The views are beautiful. The view just from this room is amazing. So I just sit right over there to do my journaling and a lot of my work and all that. So anyways, we've been talking, and we kept talking more and more about it because we're out here in 2022, and then last year we're out here again to speak. And then late last year, Kay Lee suggested, hey, why don't we spend a month out there? And so we decided to rent the same spot that we did in 2022.
Yeah, because I was thinking, we're going to keep putting this off. We're not sure if we're supposed to move or not. And it's easy to just keep thinking that, and then 10 years, 20 years, whatever, and then you never make a decision. How many times have I've done that before? And so I thought, maybe we should go out for a month and give it a try and see how we like it. And, drive it around, meet some of the people, see what the community has to offer, and just check it out. Yeah. See if it really is a possibility.
So, we have our vision of where we'd like to end up, at least in concept and principle. And then we're thinking, okay, this place seems to fit. And so, we decided, hey, let's start to practice our vision, so to speak, with a month stay. And then if we really like it after the month, then our next step would be to rent a place for a month or for a year. And we can rent our place in Pasadena for a year to pay for, the year out here. And then if it solidifies, then we can find a place. But more on our time and we're not pressured to find a place because we sold our place, whatever, we have time to get to know the area and then find a place around the lake that we'd like to live. And then, so anyways, it's just taking even baby steps to that. And so we're starting to, practice out our vision. We've talked about it quite a bit. And now we're taking that next step. And then there's another step after that and another step after that. And so this becomes less daunting because I think, one of the concerns if we sell our place in Pasadena and buy a place here in Lake Norman is even on the surface we might like it, but what if once we get here we don't like it for whatever reason? Maybe it's harder to make friends than we thought, or harder to get our business going, or whatever. There's all these what ifs, and so taking these baby steps allows us to get a little bit more acquainted with the area and meet some people, like you said, and all that. And so, really, when it comes to your vision and then fulfilling the vision, accomplishing the vision, I think number one is you got to speak it or write it down, but then also discuss it often. I think when I looked at the data of why only 8% of people that set a vision or goal achieve it, a big part of it is that they'll say it or they'll write it down, but they don't revisit it.
Well, yeah, they'll put it in a drawer and they put it away, and then the next year they're like, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to get my goals out and look at them," and because they totally forgot what they were at the end of the year. When you write them at the beginning, and so you're not looking at them, you're not taking any action or any steps because, for opportunities to arise, you got to be taking some kind of action, even if it's a small one.
Yeah, and so it's not, but I mean, visiting once a year is actually a good thing. I mean, that's where
just one time.
At least once a year.
No, but I'm saying you do at the beginning of January, some people, and then they put it in the drawer and they don't pull it out till New Year's Eve or the first of the year. So it's been a whole year since they've looked at it.
Well, that's better than never looking at it again.
Yeah. I mean, but a lot of times people don't remember what they put down.
Well, most people that fall into the, 92% of those that set a vision that don't accomplish it, a lot of it is because they've talked about it and even wrote it down, but never revisited it, period. Or it's once a year is actually a lot better. And you'll actually fall into the 8% category, or at least you will have more success when you at least visit it once a year than when you don't. So the folks that didn't even check it once a year. So once a year is actually pretty good because at least keeps it fresh. And if you keep revisiting it once a year over the next 5 years or whatever, you will start to keep thinking about it even throughout the year, even if you don't physically check it. So even the practice of once a year is actually pretty good. You will start to think about it even during the year without physically checking it.
Well, I know like Jim Carrey, he would drive to Mulholland Drive and look out and envision himself living there. And he even wrote himself a check. This was before he had made it as an actor. I don't remember what it was. $1 million or something like that, and made it out to himself. And he pulled it out of the checkbook, put it in his wallet so he would see it all the time. And then when he got his first acting movie, that's exactly how much money he made, what he had made the check out to.
Yeah, just those repetitive dreams, revisiting the dreams and all that. So, yeah, I think speak it or write it down, discuss or visit it often, and then take those baby steps. He was still applying and being turned down from one room after another, right? But you got to keep doing it and keep doing it. And so that's a great example. And then for us, we just took baby steps on just making progress and not getting so caught up with how big it is, but just making some movement and appreciating even the small progress that you make.
Well, too, and I think don't get bogged down. This is for me, looking for that perfect. There's like one perfect decision you have to make and everything's going to fall into place. You know what I mean? And then that keeps you from making any decisions because you're like, I'm not sure if this is that one perfect decision I need to make. Yeah. And then you just don't make any. And so, make small steps.
Yep.
And you know what? Even if you make a decision that maybe wasn't the greatest, you can get back on course again.
Yep. So progress over perfection, right, Penny? So I hope that helps. So again, speak it and write it, review it often, and take those baby steps towards that.
And make a vision in your mind. Imagine you in that place where you want to live, or that dream job, or whatever that goal is. Envision in your mind, because your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and something that you're envisioning. So see yourself, walk around in the different places in your vision that you see yourself doing.
Yeah. And then physically
so it feels comfortable. Yes.
Physically put yourself there somehow. So even here, when we're just every morning or every time, we're just constantly like our windows are just looking at the lake. So we're constantly being bombarded by being on the lake. Our walks in the morning and the evening are around the lake. And so you're like, yeah, I feel comfortable here. And so it is becoming reality, because there's a sense of reality because we are physically at a lake. Now it's starting to get ingrained that, yes, we could be here. Right. And so, yeah, you got to envision it and then somehow put some reality to it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you can go visit,
just like Jim Carrey, just driving around.
Yeah. If you can go visit that place, you know what I mean? You're like, oh my gosh, I feel comfortable here. I feel like I live here. It feels familiar to me.
Or even the kind of business that you want to create. Go visit a business you want to create.
Yeah.
And just get to know the people, get to know the owners, just talk or just be there.
And don't let anybody talk you out of your goals or your dreams.
Yeah. So I hope this was helpful of making your vision a reality. And so we'd love to hear from you of how this was helpful. And we'd love to hear your vision and dreams. So go ahead and email us at info@powercouplesbydesign.com. And share this episode with another married entrepreneur that needs to hear this and needs some encouragement, right? So until next week, God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.